guys, welcome to a new episode from Bugle About Reports. Today we're doing What's On, number 3. This week we're going to be talking how to build the 40k 9th edition army list. We'll be going from things you need to consider at the start, all the way until playtesting and tournament play. So, let's see who's on the channel today.
What's on? So,
What's on?
this week on the channel, we have, to start with yourself, Tobe, introduce yourself and what armies you play.
So I'm Toby. I'm part of the Bugle Bat Reps team. I played Tau in 8th. Only a bit. Guard 8th and currently 9th, building another list because obviously they've took a heavy points beating. Death Guard and Death Watch. My primary ones at the minute.
Then we've got a new face, Trish.
How are we doing? I'm Tristan. I hang around with these people who know a lot more about Warhammer than I do. Played Orcs in 8th and currently building a Sisters army to try in 9th.
Hey!
And then Nev, like always.
Yeah, Nev. I'm at a niche list, elder list, and I'm currently building Blood Angels list tonight.
And then we got this fucker, Paddy, like always.
What's on?
Well, give you a little intro about yourself in case no one's seen you. Any surprises if they haven't?
So I am mainly a Tyranid player. I do love my Tyranids. I picked up Ultramarines in 8th. I want to do a full Primaris force because I love the Primaris stuff. And then once I've been playing White Scars since like 4th edition. And I didn't want to pick them up again until they brought out some Primaris Bikers, and they finally did it. So now I'm trying to get my White Scars painted up to play in 9th edition. If not 10th, who knows? Who knows how long it will take?
11th, mate, by the time you finish it.
More than likely, yeah.
And then finally, we have George.
Yeah, hi, sorry. You brought... hi, I'm George. I was on Wasson number 1. You guys might know me from, I've known these guys a lot for quite a while now. We all play at the club together and everything. You can find me on Real Space Raiders, which is a Dark Elder podcast, so that might give you a hint as to what army I mainly focus on. I mostly focus on Dark Elder and been playing them since 5th edition, pretty much exclusively. Although my oldest army is actually by Viker Fenriker, the Space Wolves, but I very rarely take them out of their kennel because they're unpainted and I can't make a decision as to how to paint them, basically.
And he's that guy. He doesn't want to lose the 10 points.
Yeah, I don't want to lose. I don't. They're the Space Wolves were undefeated, so I'm just retiring them now. They're just going to remain undefeated.
That's right.
Did they lose to my Tau though?
They lost to your Tau because you didn't turn up until 1 hour into the game. Only got turn 1.
Trust me to arrive late.
Win to win.
Tactical cigarette.
Yeah, tactical cigarette, yeah.
Okay, so this week we're talking army list building. Pat,
Yeah.
do you want to take the lead to this? You came up with the list.
So essentially there's 3 different types of lists that you can build. You've got the fun and fluff, which I do actually quite enjoy fun and fluff games. Essentially it's where you build a list that follows the lore of that army. For instance, Tyranids bringing lots and lots of gaunts, having a big horde, or orcs, green tide. Then there's semi-competitive where they're tough, but it's not completely optimized. So you take certain units like, I don't know, say the apothecary, but not make him the chief apothecary, for instance. Or taking a full Primaris force of Ultramarines led by Gilliman. Then you've got the hyper-competitive lists. So these are the sort of lists that you would see at the top tables at LVO. So those are essentially the three lists that you could write. I myself, I prefer a bit from every box, really. I like taking a competitive list. I like taking semi-competitive, fluffy lists, essentially. I do have the odd 1 or 2 units in my lists that is considered to be hyper-competitive. But yeah, that's essentially the sort of things that I would go for. What about yourselves?
I think I fall into the middle kind of category. Don't really like try. Well, yeah, I don't like going ultra competitive. But then again, I do like having a few things that can deal damage or like a fear unit. But fluffy is good as well. Like I do like fluffy. If you can find another guy that is willing to not be that guy.
That guy.
I myself, I own fucking that many armies. I just play whatever it is on time.
Yeah.
He's what you call the tailor.
Use that one. Use that one. Use that
Yeah,
one.
I'm the tailor.
He's the tailor, mate.
Keep 6 armies in the boot of his car just in case.
That's it. When the map changes, just taking the one off the shelf.
Yeah.
I think
Rapidly rotating mirror.
I tend to fall into one of the first 2, but obviously being an orc player, it's difficult to be serious most of the time.
Well serious.
Paper red.
Yeah, I'd probably say I've had all 3. I'll probably say I've had a spongy list, I've had a semi-competitive list, and then I've had a competitive list, especially with my 3 grab tanks. I mean,
I think in 8th edition you had a proper top list, which was the Loyal 32, the grab tanks, and the Imperial Knight soup.
Yeah, that was a bit broken. And the assassin as well. Yeah, that hurt many players.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Especially when old boy didn't turn up and we had that new bloke comment and he got destroyed. What do you want to face? 3 knights or 3 tanks? For the coin, 3 tanks. It's like, well, sorry, mate.
You was that guy.
Day
I didn't
one
mean
facing
it.
knights. Wow.
Didn't mean it. He took the coin.
So me being me, I only ever stick to the hyper competitive lists. So I don't do any kind of fluff or anything like that. No, I'm joking. I kind of agree with Paddy. Like I mix between all 3. Really, it depends what kind of where I'm going. If I'm going to an event, I'll try and make my list as cutthroat as I can. Really, unless it's like a local event. But if I'm going to like a GT or something like that, I'll try and be pretty brutal with it. But most games I try and aim somewhere between lists 1 and 3. Like I really like the fluff is like a big part of the game to me. So I like making my lists adhere to the fluff of how that army actually plays or how that army would look in a sort of real life situation. But also have some units in there that are a bit like will give you a cutting edge. Basically, you want to make a game out of it. You don't want to just bring a load of like stuff that looks cool but will just die in droves, I guess. But because that's just not fun for either player really. But
I don't know. The Gaunt Horde looks pretty cool, and they
does look cool, yeah.
They did well.
But then you get that feel badsy when you play against, say, a Deathwatch player that's brought all Stalker Bolters, don't you, Paddy?
Well, we shouldn't have geared up for this basically.
So I think out of all of us here, only Paddy and George has gone to grand tournaments. The rest of us have just done local events at the minute. You two want to talk about what lists you took to the GTs?
Yeah, so I going to the heat, which is kind of like the qualifier. I took Ultramarines with Guilliman, 2 repulsors, a squad of aggressors, and a handful of troop choices. it was about. Well, I wanted to take Ultramarines because Ultramarines look cool, and Space Marines were the talk of the town at the time. And trying to go as competitive as I could, but only using Primaris, essentially. I originally didn't think that I qualified because I can't remember if I won 3 or won 2 and drew 1. I can't remember, but I only just by like 2 spaces qualified for the finals. Then when I went to the finals, Space Marines were still top table, and everybody were essentially gearing up to face against Space Marines. So they were taking, for instance, Stormbolters and Last Cannons and things like that to take on the Space Marines. So I wanted to use Tyranids because at the end of the day, I wasn't really fussed on how well I did at the tournament. It was more the fact that I wanted to see how well I could do with my favourite army, which is Tyranids. So I decided to go for a Gaunt Horde. Originally, I was running Leviathan, so it gave me a 6-up Feel No Pain. Played a lot of practice games, quite enjoyed it. Quite enjoyed using it. My opponents also enjoyed playing against them as well. And then the Blood Bowl came out and gave me the custom Hive Fleets. And what's better than a 6-up Feel No Pain than a 6-up Invul to face against those 2 damaged Stalker Bolters. So that's what I took, and I won my first 4 games and lost my second 2. So I did very well with my Space Marines with my Tyranids. So yeah, essentially that's the sort of list that I go for anyway. Whenever I go to those tournaments, they got an aspect of fluff to them, while trying to be as competitive as I can.
So what sort of armies did you meet in the finals?
So I came up against a guy called Damien Pedley. Check him out on Instagram. His painting is amazing. He was using Deathwatch. First game on stream as well, which was really cool. And yeah, so I beat Damien. Then I came up against Nathan from SM Battle Reports. He was using Ultramarines. He underestimated how good Zoanthropes were and how fast that I could pile in, because I took my usual 6-up Invul on all my gaunts. I was running like 170 gaunts. And he underestimated the 6-inch pile-in, which is the other one that I gave them. It's so good. Just maneuvering, extra maneuvering is horrid. Then I came up against who was my third game? I'm trying to think now. Pretty sure it was another Space Marine player. I'm going to say it was. I can't quite remember. Won that game. That was day 1. Day 2, I came up against an Elder player using Wave Serpent spam. He had like 6 Wave Serpents, but he didn't have enough firepower to wipe units off objectives, and he couldn't get close enough to the objectives because essentially I bubble wrapped them. So even though he had all of these flyers going around all over the place, ignoring terrain, he couldn't get close enough to the objectives and lost that game. Then I came up against Boris from the Bad Moon Cafe, and that was a very close game. He went first. He did say, like, after the game that if I'd gone first, that I probably would have won it. I don't think I would have. I think it would have been a lot more of a close game, if not a draw. But I don't think I would have won that game. I then came up against Dan from Glasshammer. He was using the typical like the top tier Iron Hands successor list with lots and lots of intercessors with Stalker Bolters, and we're playing the mission, whichever one it was that allowed characters to hold objectives and were objective secured. I had like a 13-point lead up until like turn 3, and then he realised, hang on a minute, I'm probably better at killing you in combat than I am at shooting you, and then decided then to start going for the charges, and that's then when he actually started to take down the horde. That was probably my closest game out of all 6 of mine. I think there was only like 2 points in it. And yeah, Dan went on to win the tournament, which was awesome. So I had a great time with Tyranids. Tyranids on like the second to top table. But I think we were on top table actually at the tournament.
Yeah, you were. You were on top table like from day one. Like,
yeah, it's great. Yeah, I think actually, yeah, it was, because I played on the same table 3 times during that event with Tyranids. It was great. I kept having all sorts of people coming up to me going, "Oh, did you win? Did you win?" Because they were all like, "Oh my god, he's playing Tyranids and he's beating people. What the hell's going on here?"
Even the commentators when the streaming, you were like,
Yeah.
"I don't get it."
What that shows is, if you love your army and you know your rules,
Yeah.
you can make any army work. You don't just need to follow whatever everyone else is doing.
Meta, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. If you know your army inside out, you know what's good, you got a decent army pool, you should be doing well. You just got to know your army inside out. Like, when I think during 7th, no, actually it was 8th edition, I went through 2 Tyranid codexes because I just wore them out. So I was constantly looking through and flicking page to page, and eventually the books just gave way. So yeah, I'm on my 2nd book now of the same codex. So, but yeah, read your codex, know it inside out. I don't think there's a single thing that you can teach me out the Tyranid Codex that I don't already know or haven't already played around with. So, that's where you need to be if you want to build as competitive of a list as you can. Know your codex. So,
George, do you talk about your finals?
Yeah, so I took more or less the same list to both. The only thing that I switched was in the finals. Paddy persuaded me on the day to switch my Cabal force to Blackheart, to Flayed Skull rather than Blackheart. And for the first 3 games, I was cursing the breath that was coming out of his lungs, because I was thinking, I really need Agents of Vex. I really need it. But it all came by the by, because the last 2 games, the ignored cover and the enhanced movement really, really helped me. So in the long run, I didn't really miss it. But essentially, I played a very, very similar Dracaria list throughout pretty much all of 8th. And you guys had to face it a few times at the MFM tournaments. It was 6 Talos, like 2 units of 3 Talos with Haywire Blasters, Chain Flails, and Macroscalpols. A few units of racks, little 5-man units that I just use to hold objectives and just be a nuisance, basically. A homunculus with a Vexator mask, because he makes the racks and the Talos more durable, and also the Vexator mask is just a quality relic that makes units fight last when they get near him. Then I'd have a witch patrol or battalion, depending on what edition we were playing in. And that usually had like minimum squads of witches in Venoms, a unit of Reavers to be my disruptive influence, basically. So they would usually go out turn 1 and turn 2 and just get in my opponent's face and tie up things that he doesn't want to be tied up. Because of their really fast movement, they can move in advance like 26 inches, and they can still charge afterwards, and they get a reroll to their charge. So they got a really far reach. And then I'd back that up with a bit of firepower from a Cabal force. So usually it would have been an Archon with 2 or 3 Ravagers with Disintegrators, and then the Archon would provide reroll to those Ravagers. And I'd also use that detachment to get some Venoms to put my Witches and my Carbolite Warriors in. I just found it was a really versatile list. It tended to allow me to do things that I wanted to do. Like usually it would work in a triad. So the Talos and the Homunculus and Drazar would go and be my sort of anvil in the middle of the board. And meanwhile, on one flank, I would have my fire support, which is the form of the Ravagers, and the Archon supporting them with the rerolls. And then another flank, I would have sort of a triad or a quadruple, depending on what version of the list I was playing, of Venoms with Witches and Carbolites inside, and they would all sort of work together to threaten my opponent's backfield. So with the Rax and the Talos pushing midfield, the Ravagers and the Archon kind of keeping the backfield sorted, and then my Venoms pushing one flank of my opponent's field, usually on his weakest side, to try and threaten his home objective. And that was kind of the strategy behind that list, and it works really well. So I did pretty well in the finals. In the semi-finals, I came, probably was it 7th or 8th or something like that. It was top 10, wasn't it?
You came 7th in Heat 3, and I think you came 4th in the finals.
Yeah, I think that was it. Yeah, I think that sounds about right. So I did really, really well. Like, I was well chuffed with it. I didn't really expect to do that well with Drakari at the time because Space Marines were just so dominant. But I got not lucky with matchups, but I faced 3 Space Marine armies out of my 6 games. 2 of the other games were against Chaos, and one of them was against Harlequins, which was a really fun game, actually. I can't remember, it's so long ago, but the only game I lost in the final was against Pardo from SN Battle Reports, and he had a really nice Crimson Fist list, and I misdeployed, and I wasn't aggressive enough, which is unlike me because normally I play very aggressively. But I knew that he was going to take the first turn, and he had a lot of long range firepower. And I just kind of misdeployed. There wasn't a lot of terrain on the board, and it was snowballed from turn 1 really on that game. I think my best game of that event was a toss-up between one against a pure Slanesh Demon list, which was a really, really fun, hyper-aggressive match where we both basically ran at each other, and it was 5 turns of combat with my Venoms just kind of going around the outside and trying to shoot demonettes off objectives. That was a really cool game. And then really, I think my most proud of that final was my final game against a brutal Imperial Fist list, which was like 3 Thunderfire Cannons, 3 Whirlwinds, a big blob of Centurion Devastators, characters to support them with re-rolls like Lieutenants and Captains and Chapter Masters, all that kind of jazz. And then intercessors with bolters to kind of hold objective. You look at it on paper, and it was like the kind of list you think this is going to shoot you off the board turn 1. And it was really, really brutal. I kind of weathered the storm turn 1. The way the board was aligned, there was a nice big objective in the middle, and with one of those bunkers on it, and I could use that to hide my Talos behind away from his Centurion blob, which I think he personally put the Centurion blob out of position, and it forced him to move it towards me turn 1. Which allowed me to use my Talos with Fly to jump over the building and get a turn 1 charge with my Talos and Drazar and just pick up the Centurion squad turn 1, which made a massive difference because then that was kind of his only forward element. And then for the rest of the game, my Homunculus was sat on the middle objective, my Archon was sat on the rear objective, and it was the mission where the longer the characters on the objective, they get more and more points. So it was just a case of he couldn't threaten my characters because he had to go through a wall of Talos and my Venoms before he could get to my characters that were getting me the mission objectives. So that was a really good game. So, but yeah, I think generally speaking, I like to reiterate what Paddy said, like with list building, know your codex is a really, really important one. But I also think you should not make too many changes to your list. Like I said, I played pretty much the same list throughout all of 8th. And that itself, the 8th edition list, was more or less an adaptation of the list I was using in 7th edition, which used the Corpse Thief Claw, which was 5 Talos. So really all I did was add 1 more Talos and reduce the number of Venoms I had and stuff like that. So I just played around with it, but more or less played the same play style for like 2 whole editions. And it just meant that I was just so used to that army and had so much experience playing various matchups of various other armies that I just knew what I have to do with it to, depending on my opponent and the table and the mission and stuff. So I think it's really important just to get the reps in, just keep trying it out. And if you're going to make a change, make little changes. Don't make like really big drastic changes to your list.
Yeah, don't knee-jerk it, basically.
Yeah, no, don't knee-jerk. Don't think like, oh, that unit died straight away, so I'm going to take it out of my list. It's like, no, think more critically. Like you need to employ sort of critical thinking. Think like, right, why did that unit die straight away? Did you put it in a bad position? Did your opponent bait you out? Did you sacrifice it in a way that you didn't need to? So like instead of just writing off the unit thinking, oh, that unit's junk, I'm going to put something else in. Play it some more, try different scenarios, try playing it a different way, and really try to think critically about how you play your army and your individual units in your army.
Yeah. So let's move on to actually like building an army. So we've got a couple of you guys here who's recently started new armies for 9th. Trish, do you want to talk through how you all started a new army? Like what your thinking was when you started?
Entirely rules cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Loved all the new sisters models. As soon as I saw them, I thought that I love every one of them. They all look great. And it's the other thing that made me choose them was it's a completely different play style to the orcs.
Yeah.
Their sisters are much more elite, whereas orcs pretty much just outbody you for the most part.
And Nev, you... Oh, sorry.
No, carry on, sorry.
Obviously, Nev, you started Blood Angels again recently.
Yeah.
God, just give a like reason why you've gone back to them.
Well, last Christmas I got a load of things from you boys. You've got from Toby and you got Codex and you gave me cards. So yeah, I just want to fancy play them again.
Obviously, you played them during your childhood as well, do you?
Yeah,
So
I played them from childhood. Yeah. What did you say?
So you got a little soft spot for them in your heart.
Yeah, of course. They're vampires, aren't they? Pretty much.
I think a big part of choosing an army to start, you have to enjoy playing it.
And enjoy the model.
100%.
Like, I think like if you don't like the look of the models, you're not going to want to paint them, and if you don't paint them, you can't take them to events. So, yeah.
Too often you see people just go and buy the new meta, and then after a few games they're bored because it's just no fun to play.
Yeah, I think I think that's the worst thing you can do. Really, is just see. I don't know if you're starting a new army. I think the worst thing you can do is like type into like Best Coast pairings and see like what army won X tournament somewhere, and then just copy and paste that list into your checkout page on Games Workshop, because it's just like you're not going to know how that list plays. You're not going to know anything about the army. You're not going to know anything about the models. You're not like it's just a bad idea. I think. Well, it's a good resource.
I mean, like
yeah, go on, mate.
If like hyper competitive games where you are simply playing this game to be a competitive player, you're not interested in the lore, you're not interested in painting, all you're interested in is winning tournaments, then I suppose that is your way to go. But if you're in this hobby for the love of the hobby, then certainly not the way to go. So
no.
So I can hold my hands up and say in 8th edition I did it once with Necrons, because I wanted to get into Necrons. So I found what the best possible like sort of list you could do, which was the 3 arcs, 3 fires, shitloads of mortals.
No. And Harlequins. Harlequins on tournament on YouTube, and you bought models straight away.
No, my friend.
To be fair, Nev, I mean, as Harlequin list options go, there's not a lot to play with.
Like
they've got like 6 units in their whole codex.
Yeah, I know.
But he did buy the models pretty much straight after
Yeah.
that tournament.
But my Necrons, I definitely did go off the net list. But when I played them, I actually enjoyed playing Necrons, because I was fed up with Toby slagging off Necrons non-stop. And I'll tell you a story. Me, Toby, and Trish went to a tournament one day down Red Roof. And in the car down there, he was slagging off Necrons all the way down. Got down there, he had Imperial Guard. Game 1 and Game 2, you faced Necrons, and they beat you?
Game 2, yeah.
Yeah.
But it was a tactic I've not seen him do, so it caught me off. So, yeah.
Toby, obviously you're building new 9th edition list now.
Yeah, Death Watch at the minute. Well, Death Watch Well, I'll start from what I originally started with, from 8th. So I started with Imperial Guard. Basically, as Martin and I were saying, you want to play an army that's that you want to play, basically. Back when I was a teenager, I played Tyranids. I basically just wanted to get away from close combat because I was just tired of having to, back then, I was just tired of having to run up the board. We didn't play properly with terrain. So, as Martin probably felt with Space Wolves when he first started, I was just sick of getting like to them and having like a squad of like Gene Stealers left and like a high tyrant on like 2 rooms. So I thought I'd go long distance.
Obviously, in 8th edition, both your Imperial Guard and Tau, they both had the same sort of play style.
Yeah, so my general play style is no line of sight. So old 8th edition, my Tau list, which is not really a viable list now. I was playing 3 hammerheads, long strike, 2 sky rays, and basically just enough troops to qualify the army. And I could play a commander for every detachment, but you can't do that now. And then I'd just spam as many Seeker missiles and SMSs as I could, and just try to shoot you off before you couldn't do nothing about it. SMSs ignore line of sight and cover. And then Seekers, basically I was just trying to get Magic 2 on the what are they called, marker lights, and then just I'll be able to hit you on 2s normally, and they do massive damage, like they're all D6s. It's kind of the same tactic I deploy with Imperial Guard, just loads of Mandicores, Basilisks, just shoot you straight. Yeah, turn 1 I'm shooting you because the range is ridiculous, and then I'm playing Hellhounds just to cause aggro at the front line. So yeah.
So like obviously that's your play style. You enjoyed playing that. That's why you built those lists.
Yeah.
And obviously they was quite competitive as well.
The Imperial Guard list is quite competitive. Yeah. As you felt mine.
I've been on men.
As you was on the end of most of your beatings, but obviously with the smallest amount of point changes and stuff like can turn a list like that. Like Horde armies are very fragile with regards to points. As soon as they start changing points, you've got to think on your toes straight away. But yeah, just so it looks like in this 9th edition with the point changes of Guard, I'm gonna have to reevaluate my list because they've just.
As with 9th edition now, obviously the whole game's changed. You've not got your internal missions and Maelstrom. Now it's all basically ITC it. You got your primaries, secondaries. It's a lot more holding the objectives and stopping your opponent getting secondaries and maxing yours, etc.
I like that though. I like the fact you can essentially win a game of 40k without shooting or attacking a single model in your opponent's army.
Yeah.
It's pretty much how I played the whole of the GT finals.
Passive aggressively. I'm here.
Just literally sit on objectives and just get shot at. And every now and again throw a unit out that they think is rubbish, and then they just get pwned by this one unit.
I do like how the missions make you have to think about the strengths and weaknesses of your own army. So say if you know you're going to give up easy points, but I know the bring it down rules change now, isn't it, Martin? A little bit.
Yep. So that's more viable for the vehicle list now.
Yeah. So I know before, like it was bad taking heavy vehicle lists, but I know you had to because they deal damage. But you're also giving up easy points as well that could cause you to lose. So
I think a big part when you're building your list, you have to think about the secondaries, which ones you're going to be taking, what are you going to be giving away.
Yeah, no, yeah, and what can you score easily? Ideally, if you can make an army that can score 3 secondaries reliably, like I mean, it's unlikely you're going to max out your secondaries in every single game, but if you can reliably get sort of like 10 on each with an army without even knowing what your opponent's bringing, that's a pretty solid 9th edition army list, in my opinion. because it doesn't matter what you face. You can know that you're going to score consistently on your secondaries regardless of your opponent. And then your primary, obviously, you really need to build for your primary now. Like OBSEC is a real boon. You need to have your troop choices, and they need to get where they need to be, and also stay there for a turn, which some armies really struggle with. But I think with the changes to bring it down, some of the armies that used to struggle with it now have options. So I think things like my beloved Tau or Imperial Guard and things like that, I think you'll see more transport-based lists. Like I think you'll see Devilfish come out with like fire teams inside, and Chimeras with Imperial Guard veteran squads and stuff like that inside. So they'll play in a similar way to like how I play my Dark Elder, which is my troops are in my transport, so I'm going to fly my transports up onto objectives, and it forces your opponent to say, right, I'm going to shoot that transport, but then if I do, then an OBSEC unit's going to pop out of it, and suddenly they give that objective away. And I think that's going to be quite a more common play style now in ninth with the changing to bring it down.
Yeah. I think as well, obviously, you said about having troops and stuff like that, but obviously some armies now, you don't even need to have troops to have objectives secure. Some like examples of that, obviously you got Custodes, all the infantry and bikers have objectives secure. And then Necrons, you can pick a dynasty to give your whole army objectives secure. So instead of forcing you to take that patrols or battalion, people could be taking like double spearheads or the double outriders and still having OBSEC.
Yeah, and there's also things like Space Marines have a Warlord trait that provide an OBSEC aura to like all units within a certain range of the Warlord, which can be super powerful for certain units like Deathwing Terminators, Thunderwolf Cavalry, Blade Guard veterans, things like that, like really durable units that normally wouldn't have the OBSEC but will suddenly do. And so when they're sat on an objective, it's very hard to remove them from it.
But we know, obviously, the bulk standard thing to do is just take a battalion, your 2 HQs, your 3 troops, and just build from there.
No, I don't, mate. I play Jakari, so it's triple patrol all day, every day.
Same thing, but you know what I mean. Obviously, if you're speaking outside the box, that's the sort of things you could do, especially with the Necrons and the Custodes. We won't be taking troops, ideally.
With Custodes?
Because they
Just
cost
take
that.
just take the bikes.
You now be taking like Terminators.
Fast attacks.
Yeah, I think Custodes are a really interesting one, but I think they're quite unique in their army build because they've got a lot more options because they don't need to rely on their troop choices.
Yeah. So when building an army list, what do you guys actually start off doing? What's like the first step that you take in building an army list? Let's say you go into a tournament. What's the first step of building an army list? What is it that you go for?
Well, if it's a local tournament, first thing I do is think, how can I beat Paddy? What's Paddy going to bring, and how can I annoy him the most?
How late is he going to be?
I knew that was that.
That's pretty much every game, I think. I think my army is designed just to purely beat Paddy, and it's just coincidence that it beats other people. Like,
I think obviously before you do anything, you need to research the army, what it can do. First,
what it's good at.
If you want to bring some repulsors or something like that because you like the models, it's no good and then go and buy in Blood Angels. Why are you using this for an assault army? You need to know what your army does, what
strengths and
benefits, the strengths of it, what you shouldn't really be taking if you want to be competitive like that.
So, in other words, it falls back to my original statement of know your army, read your codex inside and out, know your army. So then you have a good idea then of essentially what synergizes well with what in your codex.
Yeah.
Yeah, I say you got to build to the strengths. There's no point having one play style and then go and building an army completely opposite to what you want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that goes back to your army selection in the first place, doesn't it? Like, if like Toby says he likes playing more shooty based lists, so if he goes out and buys like a Blood Angel list or like or like a Harlequin, like goes out, oh, I'm going to play Harlequins because I like shooting lists and find out all their guns are like 12-inch range, then he's going to be like, oh no, this doesn't work. Then it's like. So yeah, I think it goes down to your army selection, like when you first start collecting. But when it comes to like list formation, I think there's a lot of things that go into your thought process. Like you sort of got to think like what's in the current meta, like what do you expect to face in a tournament, and then you've either got to go one of two ways. You either got to go like massively skewed and take something that no one would expect, which is what Paddy did. Or you take something specifically to beat like the most dominant lists that are around. But I think that's very dangerous. I think like taking a sort of tailored list to beat one army or one army type is pretty risky. I prefer taking like an all-rounder kind of list and learning it inside out, and able to play that list well against the multiple like armies or multiple opponents. And consistently playing it consistently as well is really important.
No. Right. So what I was saying is, if you're facing like a Tyranid horde and you're rocking up with 9 to 12 like last cannons, you're not gonna win. You're not gonna have a good time. Same with
you're gonna have a
you have a bad time.
Or vice versa, you play with spammy strength 4 or 5 weapons and you face a night list, it's over. But
one of the other things as well that I tend to do, if I'm looking to build a competitive list, I will watch a lot of videos on YouTube to do with that particular faction. I normally have them in the background when I'm doing things like painting, just to get a feel for like what's hot and what's not at the minute. So for instance, like eradicators being as stupid, and then you kind of get an idea of what to take in your list or what not to take. For instance, if gaunts went up to 20 points a model, even though I'd still like running gaunts and this, that, and the other. If then like I don't see gaunts anywhere, then I'd be thinking, why is nobody taking gaunts? I then do the research into finding out why gaunts aren't there, realize they're 20 points each, and then know not to bother buying any or taking any or whatever. So it's all down to the research as to what units are good, essentially.
Yeah, so example of that is obviously when I did do my neck ones at the start, I went and got all Immortals, all Tesla. Now go to knife, Tesla Zeus.
yeah, exactly. Magnetize your weapons. One of the other things as well, as much as I enjoyed playing a horde army in my games, and as much as it did do well, my body did not thank me afterwards. My back was wrecking. So play an army that suits you best. I probably won't end up taking a Tyranid horde to another tournament like that, only because
I had to give him a sensual massage between gaming days.
Yeah, it helps with the business.
Should have just done what Trish does to his orcs. Just bloody
Either.
But yeah,
he did. He had a gaunt bucket.
I did. I have a bucket that I put gaunts in because I can't be asked putting them away neatly because they're gaunts. And even when moving them, I didn't even give a crap where I moved them, as long as I had moved them into a position where they were sat on an objective or something like that. If they were in line of sight, who cares? You're going to shoot gaunts. I didn't even like move tactically with them. It was just the fact that I either moved up to screen or moved up to sit on objectives. That's all I really did with them. And yeah, moving 170 gaunts like 3 times in a game. I'm not saying that I only ever got 3 turns, because I actually finished every single one of my games. It's more the fact that once you've moved them, they're in a position, you don't need to move them again. Yeah, play an army that suits you. If you enjoy using like fast moving stuff, don't then go off and use a Terminator list, because it doesn't suit to your playstyle. If you have a glass spine, don't go off and use a horde, because it's not going to help you back at all. So yeah, you use an army that suits you and suits your playstyle.
I can vouch for that. Obviously, in 8th edition, when the fight keyword was fucking awesome, literally all my armies was just jet bikes or things that have fast movement, so I could get to where I wanted and stuff like that. And that was how I enjoyed playing. Now gone to 9th edition, obviously fight keywords been pooped on.
Redundant.
Yeah. And obviously, it's basically made me have to change my playstyle now. So instead of having like the custodian jet bikes, high event, stuff like that, I've gone to about 60 warriors on the table that move 5 inches.
Exactly. So play to your strengths, not to your weaknesses. I suppose that's it when picking an army. When you're building a list, as has already been said, like try to keep as many secondaries in mind when building a list. For instance, like with Dark Elder, picking 2 of them is really easy. You pick Scramblers and Engage in all fronts.
Yeah,
easy piece. The third one to pick is always a bit tricky. So you then got to research into what each of the mission secondaries are, as well as then like trying to guess what your opponents are going to bring. For instance, if Thousand Suns and Grey Knights are the talk of the town, then you kind of know then that the matchups that really count, you're going to be using a Bold Witch. But yeah, try and have as many secondaries in mind when building a list.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning as well that as armies get their own codexes, picking secondaries is going to be a lot simpler. I think, because generally speaking, the codex secondaries will be kind of built into how that army plays. So generally, those ones will be easier for that army to achieve, or well, theoretically anyway. So I think as codexes and GW release accelerate after COVID buggers off, people will find it a bit easier to build around those secondaries.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, from the secondaries I've seen so far, in like the Space Marine and Necron and the Space Wolves, definitely gives you more options. And I'd say, like, especially with the Space Wolves one, some of them are just like real fun to take. I remember I took it to you the heroic challenge.
Lost it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What's going on here?
I had to pick my hero and just
Oh,
like, pick one of the pads. And it was just like hero, go natty. Never happened, mine, but
the one of the other things as well, which is quite a good idea to have, is have a game plan already in mind. So when I say game plan, like different combos and stuff that you found in your codex and you want to utilize them on the table. For instance, like with my White Scars, a psychic power that increases your charge range by 2. You can also increase the charge range with a relic called Plumes of the Planesrunner to give an extra +1. And then the Chapter Champion allows you to re-roll charges within a 6-inch aura of him. So like that little bit kind of synergizes quite well with the actual army itself. So that can be involved into like a game plan. Another one is, are you going to build to kind of have like an alpha strike, or like Toby with his outer line of sight sort of killing potential. So have a game plan before you like finalize your list, should I say?
I think it's also worth noting, obviously, stratagems play a huge part in the list as well.
Yep.
Like, you need to be looking through your stratagems, finding which ones are going to help you, help which units and stuff like that. Because you could have a trash unit, but you got a stratagem, maybe it shoots again, fights again, or whatever, which could end up being, oh, this unit's actually fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Primaris, transhuman. It's like,
Gretchen are a good
Oh, yeah.
example. With Rot Shield.
Oh yeah, Grotcha strats are legit.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing as well, I mean, me and George have spoken about this plenty of times before, where you take a basic unit such as like a squad of intercessors, like by themselves, they're an okay unit. Then when you start slapping buffs on them and things like that, like the synergy that goes into making units better is also a really good thing to have, and it can also be part of your game plan. The other thing as well is have a way to counter certain units. For instance, like if knights are an issue, then what's your plan to face against knights? Or if Drakari is an issue, what's your plan to face against Drakari? So yeah, those are the sort of things as well that you need to focus on when not just when you've built your list or when building your list, but also when you're playing. So it's like, right, okay, what would I do in this scenario? Just run through scenarios when building your list.
I think to add to that as well, you don't want to solely rely on one unit. Like,
no,
you want to have an army that, say, if you lost something that you lose a unit, the army can still like manage itself.
Yeah.
Like, you can have redundant units and still be like, you can still take things down or capture an objective or do a secondary. You don't want to rely solely on one thing. It has to be balanced.
Yeah, I think that's the word there, balancing it.
Yeah, exactly. Going on the whole balance side of things as well, be as effective in every phase as you can. So when I say effective in every phase, like have movement tricks in the movement phase, have like an abundance of shooting or a presence in the psychic phase, whether it's casting or denying, have some aspect of combat in your list, and have things there as well to prevent the pain of morale, whether it's just taking MSU, so you're not going to be taking as much morale tests and combat attrition tests. So try and be as effective as you can in every phase. It's one of the things that I like to do in my Tyrannid list, for instance. Like, there's so many ways to manipulate the movement in the movement phase. There's a lot of psychers in a Tyrannid list. Shooting, Hive Guard are probably one of the best units in the Tyrannid Codex for shooting. Combat, most things are pretty good in combat in Tyrannids. And morale, they've got one of the best things to counter morale in the game, which is Synapsis. So
you don't take morale tests.
Yeah, exactly. Don't take morale tests.
Don't take morale.
So yeah, try and be as effective as you can in every phase of the game.
I'd say that's even more important now when you've got things like Nightbringer, Gaz for Orcs, where you can only do so many wounds in each phase. If you can't do any wounds in each phase, he's sticking around for a couple of turns.
Yeah,
he's sticking around all game, mate.
Yeah. Anything else anybody wants to add on the points that we've covered?
Maybe, well, if you're looking at, if you know what's good in your own army, then you obviously know what's good in someone else's if you obviously research. So maybe you'll need to think about shot selection, target selections. Mine, I know you're pretty good at wrecking lists. You want to talk about target selection?
I think that's more your like gameplay tactics, but you definitely should like know other armies, know what people are going to be playing if you're going to tournaments, like what things to expect. Like it's no good turning up with, I don't know, All your Imperial Guard, like just Imperial Guard horde troops or whatever, then coming up against like a tank list or something like that.
Nah, yeah.
Obviously, Paddy's the one off there is Tyrannid horde, but in most cases you can kind of guess what Marines are going to be playing, what Drukai are going to be playing, things like that.
But then you say like on the exception. The only reason why like that there are exceptions to this is because I don't play the army to like beat certain lists. I don't play the army to deal as much damage as I possibly can. I simply play the mission, and I that's all I focus on in the game. Like if there's certain units kicking about that are an issue, then I have those very few units that I know that can deal with it. For instance, like Zonethropes, Hive Guard, and Old One Eye. Those three are pretty much like my problem solvers in my list. The rest of it is all about holding the objectives and doing the missions. So I'm like, it doesn't matter then what I come up against. My game plan doesn't change. I sit on objectives, I delete the problem units, and I rinse and repeat. That's essentially what I do. I mean, like a lot of armies can't do that. For instance, I don't think Space Marines would be very good at doing that. They have to constantly apply pressure to the opponent. I mean, yeah, fair enough. A 3-up armor with buffs here, there, and everywhere is good, but it's not going to win you the game. It's not going to make you last forever. You have to always be applying the pressure. That goes for pretty much most armies. Because they are so like they're so expensive. Well, I say they're so expensive. They're more expensive than say a Tyranid army. So you couldn't then go off and play a Marine horde because you just wouldn't have the points and the models to be able to do it. So it does all come down to what that army actually allows you to take. Like for instance, Dark Elder are quite cheap, so if they wanted to, they can go off and do a warrior horde. You know, they don't have to go off and take yeah, it'd be rubbish. But yeah, it's the sort of things that are out there. As the fact, or like Guard are another one. Yeah, you have all these tanks and like certain units like Ogrins and stuff like that. But you could just go, I'll take as many guardsmen as I possibly can, conscripts, and sit them all on objectives, and that's all I'm going to do all game.
I think that's got play.
It's got legs.
It's got legs.
To Martin's point, what were you saying? Sorry, before I interrupted you.
About researching other armies as well.
Yes.
Know what you're going to be facing. Don't go in blind.
Know what's going to threaten you, basically.
Potentially try and deliberately play that thing that's going to threaten you.
Oh yeah, if you can. If you've got a decent like local hobby group or friend group that got a large army pool, and you can play test. It's all about play testing. Like you would think, I need to test my army against this and play it and play it and play it and play it, and make minor tweaks to your list until you can come up with strategies to beat that army in the different missions that you play.
It was like Dave Barden, wasn't it? He's been on the channel once before. He used to play Chaos Knights or Imperial Knights, and he was a great person to play against because at the time Knights were quite hot on the meta at the time. So it was great to be able to play against like that individual who had like a top tier army. So yeah, that's the other thing as well, is you're never going to learn anything if you win every game.
What are you on about?
He says that after like smashing me every fucking Friday night when I was first started.
Yeah.
Fucking kidding me.
Well, it was the first thing that I said to you though, wasn't it, Martin? You're not going to learn anything.
You're not going to win.
Winning.
You're not going to win.
That's
You're not going to win. You know, just take your beating. Yeah, you're not going to learn anything through winning every single game.
I think as well with the play testing, obviously some people they may play one game and then just go and change the whole list because maybe they had a bad matchup or the dice let them down that game.
Or went second.
And they just like a knee-jerk reaction to it is just go and change everything.
Yeah, I got to admit, I'm kind of one of those people that I'll play a list, and then the next week I'll end up turning up with a completely different list, and then when it comes to the tournament, I'm using a completely different army. I'm a bit of a sod for that, but it's mainly because I got the attention span of, I don't know, it's like I got ADHD or something.
I've lost his attention.
He did play Tau for a little while, so that probably explains it.
Yeah, I played 6 games. I played 6 games with Tau, and I was bored. I started Tau because I really like the.
He really wanted to beat George.
I think it seemed to do all right when it knocked out 90 boys in Overwatch.
Yeah. Battle suits. I love battle suits. I think they're so cool. And yeah, I really did not enjoy using them. I played 6 games and now they're all gone. No more Tau.
Good.
But then at the same time, I also so everybody else could up their game as well.
Shall we go over some armies and what we would play them as and stuff?
If you want.
Yeah.
Should we start with the orcs? Because Trish is looking a bit lonely up there.
I'm having not managed to play any games in 9th. I don't know how much use I'll be currently.
So
But,
if someone was going to play orcs in 9th edition, what would we all recommend them to do?
I don't know about recommending. It's more of a personal preference. If I was to play orcs, I'd go for full-on speed freaks, lots of bites, lots of buggies. That's how I would play orcs. I think that for me is the way to go for orcs.
Yeah, I think there's a few ways. Like for me, I'd head it up by Gaz because I mean the model's gorgeous. So for me, it'd probably be like Gaz and like 90 boys, and then splattering of other units, and it would just be just a green tide backed up with Gaz and a few other like meaty boys and knobs and stuff to throw at your opponent and just smother the board in green. But I know there are quite a lot of like decent lists floating around. Like I know, as Paddy says, Speed Freaks are doing pretty well. The like buggy spam kind of thing. Like I know Orcs got a recent release with like loads of Speed Freak buggies. I've heard they've been doing pretty good because they're very very mobile, very reasonably durable by Orc standards, and can actually have some relatively good shooting. So I think the orcs are doing all right. There's a lot of ways you can play them, and they're a bit like Space Marines where they've got quite a large model pool, so you can play around with a lot of it. So yeah.
What are those flyers, Tris, that have got the like ridiculous stratagem?
Flying Headbutt.
Yeah. Flying Headbutt.
That's any of them you can use it. I think it's the Burner Bomber that's the best, where you just fly it into the ground and it does. I think I think it's flat 3 wounds to everything within 6 inches.
It's savage.
Quality strat. Quality.
Definitely an Orky strat.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It got better with the FAQ, the Burner Bomber, because you can drop your bomb and fly off the board in the same turn.
Or you can drop your bomb and then drop yourself.
Yeah.
I think my favoured way to run the orcs when I was playing in 8th was to force your opponent to make a choice. So I'd build lots and lots of boys up front and plenty of shooty stuff at the back, cover them all with Gretchen, and wait to see which one the opponent went after.
Yeah.
And then play the other one. So if you went after the guns, I'll smother you in boys. If you go after the boys, I'll just hammer you with the shock attack guns and the mech guns.
It's definitely more.
I think if you can force your opponent to make a choice.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, double-edged swords. I'm a massive fan of double-edged sword sort of scenarios. I do it quite a lot with my with my Space Marines or with my Tyranids. For instance, with Tyranids, things like Old One Eye, Hive Guard, and well, essentially all of my characters and Hive Guard and Zone Tropes, like they're a massive threat because they can deal quite a lot of damage. But then, if you're trying to kill them, then you're not shooting at the Horde, and the Horde is sat on objectives getting me points. But then, if you were to kill all my Horde, or try to kill all the Horde, then you've got Zone Tropes, Hive Guard, and characters in your face, causing you issues. So it's like I'm a big fan of double-edged swords. Double-edged swords are fun.
Toad, do you want to talk about Death Guard a little bit? See, the codex just dropped.
Well, I haven't actually read that new codex yet, but I've seen a few things pop up. I like the -1 toughness with their auras, and the distance increases after every turn. That's quite nice. It's very fluffy as well. I'm hoping that the because it's -1 toughness, I'm hoping that Veterans of the Long War is still going to be a thing. So then it stacks.
I don't think it is. If it is, it's been renamed. But I don't think they get. I do think they have quite a few +1 to wound stratagems, but they're not called Veterans of the Long War. I don't think.
Or something within that line.
Yeah. I've seen the stratagem list, and they do have quite a few like ways to buff their attacks and wound values, and quite a few really significant ways to deal mortal wounds up close as well. They got one stratagem that stuck out to me was a really pumped up orbital bombardment that causes it works in the same way where you pick a point on the map, and then any unit within like a certain range of that takes D3 mortals on a 2+. And on a 6, they just take flat 3.
Oof.
Yeah, it's pretty dirty. But yeah, I think Death Guard are going to be quite interesting because they're going to be quite meta shifting. I think because they're essentially got the durability of Space Marines plus more, and that might, as Toby said, that -1 toughness really skews the math a lot.
Yeah.
Once they get into range of you, or you get into range of them. And suddenly, all their weapons are wounding you on 2s and 3s, and they're re-rolling 1s because everything's plague. I think Death Guard are going to be quite scary.
And I think you're going to see a lot more of Mortarion.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a beast.
Yeah, I've not took him out for probably 4 or 5 months.
Bring him out, put him on the board. He's amazing.
But I like obviously it's a mid-table army, so I'd probably play it how I always play it, and just live in the mid-table. To try and keep hold of the objectives because I know they're going to be hard to shift. Yeah.
If you get Death Guard Terminators, are just going to be fucking unkillable.
They're going to be hard.
Mm.
But yeah, it'd be interesting to get Mortarion back out because he was not. You couldn't really play him in the 2K list without sacrificing half your army, and it's an elite army anyway.
One thing I am sad about the Death Guard stuff. No, see, I'm actually a fan of that. The Blight Lord Terminators, the bodyguard ones. Their bodyguard rule has changed now. So it doesn't do it for any character. It does it for characters of 9 wounds or less. So they can't protect Mortarion anymore. But with the buffs and stuff that he gets, he's a proper beast.
He's going to be
I'd probably say, yeah, he's rocking 3 warlord traits as well.
And you can give him a 4, I think.
Yeah, I think it's one of the it's kind of like a specialist attachment thing I think they can take, but it's if you've taken that one, then he gets an extra warlord trait or something. So yeah, he's running around with 4, but he's very hard to kill now. He's a lot harder than what he was to kill last time because he not only does he still have the 5 up, feel no pain, but he also has a -1 damage as well. So that's quite nice.
I'd say definitely counters the combat armies very well, like Blood Angels and Space Wolves.
Yes.
You don't want to be getting
Yeah.
combat anymore.
No. You didn't want to be, but you could shoot him off the table pretty much guaranteed.
I don't know. I think someone did the maths on it a while ago, and they when they first saw his data slate, and they said on average you'll need like 18 Eradicator shots at that melter range to kill him.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty brutal. And that's without him like buffed in any way with like minuses to hit and stuff. That's just as his standard data slate profile. Like,
It's definitely that with all the buffs he's got, you're definitely going to see him on the table a lot more now.
Yeah, I think so.
He should be on the table.
Yeah, I worked out for my army. I need 263 splinter rifle shots.
See, I'll just ignore him and hit him with guns.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty happy with how Life's doing with the big characters on it. Obviously, Orcs, you got Gaz, Necrons, you got the Solid King, now you got Mortarion. It's definitely allowing you to play these big characters that you wouldn't want to put on the table before.
Yeah.
Because they're actually worth taking now.
Yeah.
And that's
I mean,
good.
it's not-
It brings the narrative back into the game, like, and who doesn't want to see like those awesome like showdown moments between like Mortarion and Guilliman? Like, you want to see those moments, like, that's why we play this game. So I think if they make those kind of units good, so you're actually more likely to field them in all manners of the game, then that's great.
Should we talk a little bit about some Space Marines?
Throw a dart at the Codex and put that in your list.
There's a lot of holes there.
Yeah, with Space Marines at the minute, the sort of things that for the competitive players, like the sort of things out there, is the Master of Sanity chaplains being able to recite 2 litanies, the Chief Apothecaries being able to bring a guy back to full wounds for 0 CP, as well as healing 2 guys. Then it depends on what codex you're using, or what chapter, sorry. So, for instance, like White Scars, things like Blade Guard and Vanguard are pretty good. The same goes for Space Wolves and Blood Angels. Having those 2 units are pretty good.
Yeah.
For the most part, Eradicators are still really, really good, and they're pretty much good in every list that you play. More so Salamanders. But yeah, Eradicators, I'd probably say, along with the Chaplain and the Apothecary, as long as you've got those there, you can't really go wrong with them. But for me, I don't really like Gravis anyway, so I wouldn't take the Eradicators. I'd still poach them up and have them if ever I know that I'm playing George.
If you're firing 5 Eradicators into a Venom, you can have that Venom.
Yeah.
You can just have it, mate.
You can have it. Antlers, that is going to be so chuffed. Look at this model that I spent ages painting. I died in the first turn of the then like keeping the fluff. Like, even though Outriders have gone up in points, still having 9 of them in my Space Marines list. Or my White Scars, should I say?
I think you can't really go wrong with.
Yeah, again, Redemption is really good. They are really good for White Scars as well, but Dreadnoughts don't really suit the fluff. There is actually one bit of fluff that I do like about the Redemptor Dreads. The actual Dreadnought, it, in other words, kills the host. Where other Dreadnoughts, they can stay in that coffin until the day they die, like die, get blown up. but the Redemptor Dreads, they tend to kill the host. They don't tend to last very long, which I thought was actually quite funny. Oh yeah, it's like a solution to keep the Primaris alive. Nope, Redemptor Dreadnought eats them. So, but yeah, Redemptor Dreadnoughts are pretty good.
Terminators, the old school fastborn Terminators, they're quite good in most lists as well now. Because
Yeah.
Storm Shields.
More so in Dark Angels than any others. They're
Like
just-
Space Wolves and Blood Angels, they're still really good, I would say. No.
Space Wolves Terminators aren't to be underestimated because they work in much the same way as Chaos Terminators, where you can have like a combat weapon or a storm shield plus combi weapons, and they're actually pretty cheap. So coming out of Deep Strike and firing off like multiple plasma guns, and you got a Terminator with a storm shield, like they can do some damage.
Yeah. Trying to think what other units. Again, like we're going for the synergies more than anything. I mean, one of my units that I'll probably use in my more competitive White Scar build is the Reaver Lieutenant with the Rights of War Warlord trait. So that's the one that gives you OBSEC, because then you can run him up onto an objective. He could be the only one there. Yeah, he's got OBSEC, and your opponent's got OBSEC as well. But then the Reavers have a stratagem that works on the Reaver keyword to then switch off OBSEC. So it's quite good just to go, okay, I'll just blast them up the board, sitting on an objective, turn off your OBSEC. Yeah, I've got that objective sort of thing. So it's a very cheap unit to be able to do it with as well. It'll cost you a Warlord trait and I think 1 or 2 CP for the stratagem. So, but it's always a good little tool to have in that toolbox. What was the other things? I mean, Dreadnoughts overall, actually, I quite like.
Dreadnoughts are super solid now.
Yeah, I really like to see a Dreadnought, either Space Wolf or Iron Hands list. I'd love to see that on the board.
Space Wolf Dreadnoughts, I could just put them on the board if you want.
I think there's loads of Dreadnoughts coming soon, to be fair.
Loads of Dreadnoughts if you go back.
Bring a lot of Dreadnoughts.
Lots.
I think for Christmas, Ben on our channel, we all gave him Dreadnoughts.
Like 4 or 5
We've got
Dreadnoughts.
like 6 or 7 Dreadnoughts soon.
Nice. But yeah, like George said, just throw a dart at the Codex and you can't really miss a bad unit.
Yeah, you know, pretty much every unit in the Space Marine Codex is good. There are some that are slightly more efficient than others, but generally speaking, they're all good. So it's kind of play the units that play to the strengths of your chosen chapter.
What
so,
units would you say are like unplayable at the minute?
Any units in the Space Marine Codex?
I would use Reavers. Those guys that they're a bit.
No, I wouldn't say they're unusable. As Paddy said, they've got a really nice stratagem that turns off OPSEC, which is really powerful. And the Space Wolves Reavers get special rules. They're called the Hounds of Morkai, and they basically mess around with Psychers. They can shoot at Psychers and ignore the Lookout Sir rule, and their pistols become +1 to wound and damage 2. And when they're near Psychers, they take minuses to their psychic tests. I think it's -1 or -2. They can never be targeted by psychic power, like ever. So like they're not terrible in any way. Like, and they're the same points as a normal unit.
What do you think about Scouts?
Scouts are terrible.
They are terrible, but they still kind of have their uses. I mean, like if you are using an army that doesn't really use the elite slot, and you've got a spare however many points, it's quite good to have 1 or 2 units as scouts to sit on objectives early game, because they are just going to look at them and go, well, they're scouts. Why am I even going to bother targeting them? But then when they're sat on objectives, I mean, they're half the points cost of infiltrators. So if you don't have the points or the models for infiltrators, you could still use scouts, but yeah, they are pretty terrible because they are now elites.
They are.
So-
They
Just
still
think how
any
many
good
people
for
have got.
manipulating.
Yeah, the one good thing that I am glad about with the scouts is they were only like 15 quid a box. I have got 3 squads of scouts.
I think everybody has on the shelf.
Yeah, I think everybody's got squads of scouts.
Sat collecting dust.
My biggest hate for the scouts though is the models. The models are horrible. They're so rubbish. But yeah, they are pretty jank. I wouldn't say that they're unplayable, but they are pretty jank.
I think
So-
one of the uses you could do is just run like bare bone scouts and just use them for like deploy stranders or actions.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, that's the thing. Like, you know, if you have got the points to be able to do something like that, like if you do have a spare like 50 or 60 points, however many points they are, and you think, oh yeah, I could do with like 1 extra unit. Having scouts is quite a handy one to have. So, you know, they do still have their uses, but they are still jank. So, servitors as well, because they've gone up in points. I'd probably say another one of those.
They can't perform actions anymore, can they? Are they?
They can't perform actions, and I think they've gone up. They've been pointed out of existence as well, I think. So, some people would argue Centurions.
Death Watch, Tope. Says you're building them in a minute.
What's jank?
Oh, that's good.
What you?
There's a lot of
I think
things.
you
that
should
are
mention your 5-man outriders.
5-man outrider squad sound really good.
good. Yeah. I don't know. I've not played them yet, but yeah, it sounds good.
I put 15 in the list, mate, and
That's
paint them
what
white just
Yeah,
to play it on
yeah.
Death Watch.
Conveniently, mate, I happen to have 12. But,
There you go. See, 2 squads. It's good.
But yeah, I'm more.
Fuck you guys, okay?
So yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm also interested in seeing how. I know it's going to be very point heavy, but dropping like a 5 eradicator unit down instead of like playing the tank, and then hide them behind the heavy intercessors. So it kind of gives them a bit more of a shielding. But
Have they out yet?
No.
No, I didn't think they were.
No.
I was thinking the other day, I was like, why haven't I actually seen any of them on the board? Now I know.
They ain't there yet.
But
Very
Dreadnoughts,
good.
like you coming back to Dreadnoughts, like because they're still core, I would plan on using them just because I'd still get the rerolls. So yeah, Leviathan, Dreadnought, I'm pretty sure they can still be deep striped along with 2 other units. But I haven't really misread it, which is the same as they could do. So having that like appear anywhere on the board is pretty like lethal.
Yeah, it is.
That's the other thing. I don't think Leviathans are like been taken out of the game. I still think Leviathans are still pretty good. They're they still have their uses. I mean, like they've come down in points like dramatically.
Yeah.
The twins storm cannon arrays, I don't think you'll see many of those ones on the board, but the
Grav.
like the combat version maybe. I mean that's one of the things that I'll be working to on my white scars, because I've got a Leviathan, and
welcome.
I intend on putting him on the board. But yeah, I will be giving him the Leviathan combat claw and the big melter that they've got.
Yeah, the Grav flux thing in it. Is that it?
No, the melter.
The melter.
Yeah, the melter is awesome. It's like strength 9, 2d3 shots. Pretty beastly.
It's beastly. So yeah, that's probably what I'd plan on doing. I mean, before obviously with the keyword, I was playing repulsors, but now you can't fall back and shoot. It's going to hurt too much. Losing.
I think a lot of your list building nowadays is again also rely on obviously the core keyword, what character buffs you're going to be having, things like that.
Yeah, synergy.
Yeah. I'll tell you what unit just did pop in my head. That's not going to be playable hardly ever. Is Centurions.
Well, I don't know. If I was playing Imperial Fists,
Yeah, I'd put them in a fist list.
or some fists, I'd still use them. They're still a really good unit. To be honest, as well, I'd actually even consider still using the Combat Centurions in a White Scars list.
Yeah, because they can still move really quick.
Yeah, still got plenty of ways to move them. So yeah, they're not as playable as what they were in other lists, but they still have their uses.
Martin, what are your thoughts on Sanguinian Guard? I know you got a thing about them.
Oh, they're a good unit. I like them.
Are they undercosted?
That and Death Company auto takes your Blood Angels. If you're not taking them, why are you playing Blood Angels?
Yeah.
I like rhinos.
What do you mean? What? Sorry, I missed what you said then.
I like Lucius Pattern rhinos. That's all I like.
Yeah, rhinos are cool. That's the other thing as well. Is like you don't see many of, but I would actually consider like throwing one into a list as the distraction rhino.
Yeah.
Distraction rhinos are always quite funny.
Right, what's next, Martin? Who do you want us to talk about next?
Space Wolves.
Let's go with Space Wolves, George, because you're getting Star Wars soon.
The all-star unit in the Space Wolf Codex, in my opinion, is the Thunderwolf Cavalry. They went from like meh to really good. Like the ability to advance and charge is amazing. They get +1 to their consolidate and parlins, which is amazing. They gained a wound. The Storm Shield change actually makes them better, really, because now they have a 2-up armor save against anything that hasn't got AP, and they still have a 4-up invul in combat against anything. 4 wounds apiece. Yeah, and you can kit them out. They behave basically the same as Vanguard vets, but on a wolf, which is cool. So, like, put Thunderwolf
With that.
With me, every time I use my Thunderwolf Cavalry, I always take them no matter what. But they always never perform for me.
Go, here we go. Get the
How do you load them out?
I think I just got terrible luck with them.
How do you load them out?
Usually 1 hammer, 2 power fists.
And
that's it, usually.
What, you just have three guys?
Yeah.
That's where you're going wrong. You need 5.
Yeah.
You need, like 2 squads of 5.
3 5-man units.
Yeah, two 5-man units. I would auto put that in every Space Wolf list, like every. And I'd even be tempted to push it up to 15. But then it's starting to get. So I think you can have a unit of 5 with 3 power fists and 2 lightning claws is about 290 points with all storm shields, which really isn't that much when you're talking about 20 wounds at T5 with a 2-up armor and a 4-up invul. Like, that's pretty good. That's able to move and advance and charge, can consolidate an extra inch, which makes a huge difference on their base size because they've got a really big like dreadnought base, so they can, when they pile in, they can really like wrap stuff around and touch other units. So I think Thunderwolves for me are the all-stars in Space Wolves. Their dreadnoughts are really good because they've got some really beastly combat dreadnoughts, and with that -1 damage buff that the dreadnoughts got, it's really good. I think Space Wolves troop section is really versatile now. Like they got
on the dreads for Space Wolves. What do you go towards? Ven dreads or Wolfen dreads?
I like Wolfen dreads because you can arm them with a claw and a shield, and they can take a heavy flamer on both arms. And with their movement of 8 and their ballistic skill of 5, they don't care because they're having double heavy flamers. So, and their claw will be hitting on 2s and re-rolling all wounds at flat 3 damage for like 5 attacks, which is pretty good, I think. But I do know the updated axe profile is really tempting, so I might give that a go and see how it goes. But I'd have to drop a heavy flamer, so it'll make them probably a bit cheaper. But
myself, I run them all the time as Vendreads, mostly, with the axe and shields.
Yeah.
Just for the fact they'll hit on 2s, they feel no pain, plus the -1 damage, does make them a bit more survivable.
Yeah, it definitely does. I think, like, for me, it's the Wolfen Dreads. You get obviously the reroll charge and the extra movement. And I know they're only weapon skill 3, but with the Space Wolves, obviously the first round of combat you get +1 to hit anyway, so it kind of doesn't matter.
But when say you're running the Dreads, are you going to be using them just for the models themselves, or are you going to be using them to protect like Murderfang and beyond?
No, I'm going to throw my Dreadnoughts at my opponent. like that's it. Like I think I would take Bjorn, but I think that since he lost his +1 CP, he's not as pretty as he used to be, and he's a bit slower. Murderfang's still very good, I think, for his points. As a character dread, he can really pump out the hurt. But I think for me, it'd be like I'd focus mostly on like having a good selection of troop choices, usually in transports. Although the infiltrators are good, but for me, I really want to keep my Space Wolves like firstborn kind of. I don't want Primaris in my Space Wolves list, but that's just me. Because I don't really want to go through the pain.
You gonna put Ragnar in or not?
I have got him. He's the only Primaris model I own, so like literally. But I don't know. It is tempting to put Ragnar in an Impulsor with a unit of 5 Blade Guard veterans. I think that would be very, very sexy. But I think for me, Thunderwolf Cavalry and then troops and Dreadnoughts for me, and just throw it all at my opponent.
Anything else anyone wants to add on?
What, Space Wolves?
Just in general.
Is there much point on talking about Dark Elder currently, considering that they're due a new codex?
I wouldn't say so, mate. Like, it's really hard. There's a problem we've been facing in the podcast. We had all this material like backed up saying, we're going to talk about this tactic and that tactic and so on and so forth, but it's all kind of irrelevant. I think Dark Elder are going to play similar. Like, they're still going to rely on their transports. They're still going to be really fast. I think what's going to change about the codex is their damage is going to go way up, but their durability is going to go either sideways or slightly down. I'm expecting some nerfs to like the Coven stuff, because Prophets of Flesh is still pretty durable. I don't expect that to stay the same, but I do expect our damage to go up to compensate for the general damage increase across the board with the newer codexes. But yeah, not much point. I don't know any. I only have 2 armies. I'm not like you guys. We have like 6.
I mean, I could talk about Tyranids. So, the sort of thing that I pretty much auto include into my lists. I always take Old One Eye because he is a pure powerhouse. Doesn't matter what list I'm running. Neurothropes is another one. Take 1 or 2 of them because they're a cheap character, quite tough to kill, and they do generate quite a bit of like buff to the army. Can also deal out a little bit of hurt as well with their smites. Depends really. There's quite a few different ways to play Tyranids. You can either go Horde, which I prefer. The combat version with Gene Stealers, it's terrifying turn 1, but then they just get shot off the board quite quickly because they've only got 5 up saves. The shooting version, pumping out like 2, maybe even 3 squads of Hive Guard, 2 Exocrines, quite nasty.
I think that's popular ones, isn't it? You see a lot of with like
Yeah, you do see 2 Exocrines running around with either 1 or 2 squads of Hive Guard, squad of Zoanthropes. Then there's melee like Malanthropes and cheap chaff units to do objectives. Rippers, I do really recommend taking Rippers because they're a cheap deep strike unit with OBSEC. The other one is Lictors. Lictors are really cool. They're probably one of my favourite units in the Tyranid Codex. Just because they have a presence on the board. You know, people kind of look at them and go, "Oh, you know, it's a medium-sized model. Well, it must hit quite hard." So then they tend to focus quite a lot into them when they're not actually that hard hitting, if you know what I mean. They don't have OBSEC. They're good at just being able to flip onto the board, charge, say, Ghost Arcs, and stop them from shooting for a turn. Other than that, they don't really have much of a use.
I'd say they're really good action monkeys, mate.
Well, yeah, again, they're quite good at doing scramblers because they have
scramblers, raising banners. Like if that's what you want to do, like
they have quite a good movement as well. They got a movement of 9, which is quite good.
Yeah, so good at getting around and stopping your opponent from doing actions as well because they can drop in and make that charge. And I think Lictors are really cheap, really good unit that can just be anywhere and just be a real nuisance.
The only downfall really in the Tyranid Codex is the units that you want to have multiples of. For instance, Hive Guard, Zoanthropes, and Lictors. They're all elites, which is kind of annoying. So you're either reduced on what you can take, or you're then forced to have to take multiple detachments. You could also say the same as well for the HQs as well, because a lot of the synaptic creatures in the Tyranid Codex are HQs, so you always need to have synaptic creatures in your list. I tend to have 1 synaptic creature for every 2 units that I have. That's 10 to like my sort of ratio that I go for. But yeah, the great thing about Tyranids is you can pretty much go down any route with them.
Yeah.
I like the new Monster Mash list that are turning up with the Forge Rod changes, mate, with like triple Dimacharon or Hierodules.
Yeah, triple Dimacherons and double Hierodules are the ones that I've seen. But people don't tend to take the wild ones. They tend to take the scythed Hierodules.
Yeah, because they're cheaper and faster.
I don't think they're faster, but they are cheaper.
Yeah,
and they hit hard in combat.
The big flame is amazing.
Yeah, the only downfall to that though is 1 damage.
It's just weight and dice, dude. Like, and when you think if you're running Monster Mash, you got like five big monsters that can chop up any big thing they touch. The thing you're missing is anti-infantry. So now you got like two big flamers that are really good at taking out hordes, and it brings that duality and that redundancy in your list. So I think I was reading up on it the other day when someone mentioned that Dimacharon's really good, and I looked in your Forge Rod book at the Tyranid section. I thought, yeah, I can see play here. Like the Dimacharon, particularly against Marines, looks really strong.
Well, they're not very good at taking out Wolf Lords, Redemptors, or Gilliman. I know that much. But this is all about, it's all about the play testing of your list. You're not going to know this if you rock up to a tournament unless you play test. So, again, going back onto the list building side of things, play test. The only way you're going to learn.
Look out for the keywords.
Yeah, and also read your stratagems. So I know that I said earlier that there isn't really much you can teach me, but I learned something that day. I learned that it does not work for every monster. That stratagem.
You're gonna learn today.
Yeah, I learned it. But yeah, the Tyranids are great in that aspect where you can literally go for any type of list, and yeah.
I think that goes back for me. Like, I think I'm not sure if we mentioned it, but like when you go right back to the start after you've picked your army, like for me, it's before I even start putting points or anything on your app or on your piece of paper or whatever, I choose a theme. Like I choose like what style of army do I want to play, and obviously each army is limited in like what styles of army they can play. You can within an army you can play like heavy mech, heavy infantry, heavy monsters, heavy. You could pick some kind of like an avenue to go down, or you could pick a theme of like what you want your army to do. Like, do you want to completely dominate the shooting phase? Like, in which case, how can you do that within your codex? Or do you want to completely dominate the movement phase? In which case, how can you do that in your codex? And I think that's a key way to go as well. I mean, if you pick a theme and then you can kind of look through your codex, find the units in your codex that are like good at that particular theme that you're trying to stick around, and then start putting those in. But then once you get like sort of halfway through your list, start thinking to yourself, okay, if I was to put these on the board, what would they struggle against? And then put some of the units in that might counter those units that you would normally struggle against. And then you can start to fill a more rounded list. I think Tabletop Tactics do a really good analysis where they kind of split their army list into three, where they say like, I'll do a third anti-infantry, a third anti-mech, and a third like speed. And that brings a kind of like good all-round list where you've got the speed to handle like the primary mission and to be where you need to be to score the points. You've got the anti-infantry to handle like obviously hordes of models, and you've got the anti-mech to handle your monsters and your vehicles. I think that's a really good kind of skeleton to build on when you're going into army list design. And then like obviously you can go the complete opposite way and build a massive skew list, which will against certain matchups will just be a complete non-game at a competitive setting because your opponent's just not ready for it. But then you will have those bad matchups where your opponent is ready for it and he'll just blow you off the board. Like for instance, if Paddy had the unfortunate of like taking his Tyranid Horde list against, I don't know, Paddy like
an aggressor.
Yeah, like an aggressor list with like 15 aggressors and bolter like intercessors and like repulsor executioners with Gatling guns and all that kind of stuff. Like then he's suddenly going, oh, okay, like my god, we're dying in droves. But that's a really kind of skewed list, and that's just a bad matchup. You can't really prepare for those bad matchups. The only thing you can do is think like, how can I do all the things I need to do in a game consistently through, no matter who I'm playing against. And there are core principles to the game, like the game has monsters, the game has infantry, or the game has monsters and vehicles, the game has infantry, and the game has objectives. Now, the objectives and the mission is like the most important part of it, but you also need to have ways of dealing with your opponent's models. And yeah, so that's why the whole split it all into thirds is a really good way of starting a list.
Yeah. Going on to the subject as well with like I did with my Tyranids, like you read the meta, like look at what the meta is at the moment and go, right, okay, how are people countering that? For instance, like when we went to the GT final, a lot of people were running Stalker Bolters because they're 2 damage and they kill intercessors really easy. So essentially what I did, I countered the counter to the meta, is essentially what I did. So I tried to not interact with my opponent as much as possible, while trying to be as annoying as possible as well, like forcing my opponent to interact with me.
Paddy, though, he doesn't really need to try.
Well,
it's effortless.
It is a gift. So like I force my opponent to interact with me, and I've done the same with my White Scars, because a lot of people will say like the way to beat Space Marines is not to interact with them and just do the mission. So the way that I built my White Scars and the way that I pretty much build all of my lists is I force my opponent to have to interact with me. Again, going back to that double-edged sword scenario where, you could either do one thing, but then the other thing's going to get you, or do the other thing, but then this thing's going to get you. So it's like Tyranids, again, do that really well. Where they don't need to interact with my opponent, but they can if they want to, and just play the mission. So, but a lot of armies are forced down a certain avenue. For instance, like Tau, they don't have a psychic presence, they don't have a combat presence. They're very much movement phase and shooting phase. Or Dark Elder, for instance.
Yeah,
you're kind of forced to have to take your transports because your stuff is so fragile. And why ignore one of your strengths and your speed on your transports? So you are kind of forced down a certain avenue with certain lists. Where Space Marines are one of those where jack of all trades, master of none. And I think that's one of the reasons as well why you can ignore Space Marines for the most part and just play the mission. So coming up with a way to counter the meta it can be quite difficult for certain armies. For instance, again, like going back to George with his Dark Elder, when you geared up to face against Knights when Knights were quite prevalent, and you only came up against one Knight player, but then you came up against so many other lists
with vehicles in that tournament.
Well, yeah, that was the thing. Like, you only played against one army that had vehicles, which were Knights. Needless to say, you won that game, but every other game you struggled because you just didn't have the firepower to be able to deal with other units.
18 Haywire blasters, and I only play against one army with vehicles in.
Yeah. So, going for the meta it can work in your favor, but then I think it's very much a rock paper scissors scenario. So you could go, right, okay, for instance, like Manichima, when he went to the LVO, he brought 3 Whirlwinds, 3 Whirlwind Scorpiuses, 3 Thunderfires, and I think he brought 3 of the Rapier Thunderfire cannon variants, and that's all he brought essentially. And every single game for the first 5 games out of the 6, he tabled his opponent turn 2, I think it was. But then he came up against I think it was in his last game, and he came up against a list that didn't really care about his low strength. I say low strength, strength 7 being low, but it was still the fact that he was running. I think the guy he lost against, he had repulsors and other stuff at strength 8. Not strength 8, toughness 8. So all of his firepower didn't really do a lot. But then at the same time, he'd I can't remember how he lost, but essentially the guy that he came up against was using a competitive list, but then Manny had won the rock paper scissors for the first 5 games, and then came up against the losing match in the 6th game. So yeah, going for the hyper competitive list is always that risk. It is predominantly down to the player on what list you use. I mean, I've used underrated lists plenty of times, and I've done well against certain opponents because I'm a good player with that army. But then I couldn't jump onto, say, Harlequins using the best list and go up against somebody who knows Harlequins and expect to win, because I'm not a Harlequin player. The same how even though I consider George to be a really good player, I generally don't think George would win very many games playing Knights. So
I'd put them in the bin.
Yeah, exactly. So therefore you'd lose. So yeah, but building lists to follow the meta is a good idea, but at the same time you're you're running that rock paper scissors thing. So
6 months later, it's in the bin.
yeah, 6 months later, you're changing your lists anyway. You could go for the balance list, and you could do really, really well, but then you could also do terribly. One of the things that I like to do is bring a wild card. For instance, like again, going on my Tyranids, the wild card in the list was always Old One Eye, because people just look at him with him being like a 3rd edition model, looking at him going, oh yeah, it's just a Carnifex, really, isn't it? And then with the random buffs that I've given him, for instance, like the 6-inch piling, all of a sudden he's rocketing across the board, advancing and charging, doing some attacks, killing that unit, piling in 6 into the next unit and attacking again. So like people kind of take a step back and think, what the fuck? It was like when I was on stream, when I was like 5 inches away from Damien's intercessor squad, and he killed Old One Eye, and I was like, I need that unit dead. Okay, well, I'll fight Old One Eye in the fight phase. I pile in 6 and then wiped out that unit. And Damien was like, I really did not expect for that to happen, didn't plan for it, and it's what I called the wild card. Again, with spore mines, using the spore field strat, it was pretty much my only way to get first blood in all of my games, was using that strat. And again, people were just like, I don't understand how this worked. And then they either come up against it or they see it happen and they're like, oh, damn. It's the wild card. It's the thing that nobody ever sees, so nobody ever really plans for it. So again, it was like with George with your Reavers. When you randomly started bringing Reavers to tournaments, people were like, the hell, nobody uses Reavers, they're rubbish. And then all of a sudden they're just tying up everything in the back line, and they're now stuck in the back line where the rest of the stuff is all running around doing shenanigans. So
yeah, it's always good to throw. I think it's always good to throw a wild card unit in your army, like something that no one really plays in the competitive meta, and then the
Shadow Sword.
Yeah.
Start running scouts.
I think
wild cards is always good. I'm a big fan of wild cards.
Say again?
Chris, you're quite good at like just chucking in something randomly surprising.
One of my favourite things to do was to have big squads of boys with a weird boy in War Boss in the middle, and then hide at the back another weird boy with a squad of mega knobs, and wait for them to expect you to jump the big squad of boys forward, and then you stick 3 mega knobs with kill saws in the back line.
Yeah.
Everyone always thought, there's a big squad there, I'm going to space out, make sure they haven't got room to put 30 boys, but they'll always leave you room to put 3 knobs.
Yeah.
It's always disturbing when you get that surprise knob.
Yeah.
Especially in your back line. It's just
you don't want
no one ever sees me coming.
You don't want a surprise knob in the back line. You just don't.
That's going to be the advertisement for this video.
Surprise knobs in your back line.
Knobs in the back line.
Right. Are you about there? Because we're about 2 hours already.
Anybody wants to talk about?
Trish, Tope, anything you want to add?
No, I think the only thing I would say about the wild cards, like I said, I bought a Shadow Sword once, and I was expecting. I think I saw 3 or 4 Knights lists before we seen it. And I didn't face any. But that was it.
Did you face another Shadow Sword in that game or not?
No, but there was one there.
You didn't face it though, did you?
No, I didn't face it. No, I didn't face any like Titanics or anything.
Yeah.
So.
I say, what happened in eighth? Obviously, I did come across the fucking Iron Hands when they was top dog. and that was just painful to play against. I remember me and Nev was in a doubles tournament, and it was like 19 out of 20 teams was all Marines. Me and Nev was the only one there with Aldiri, South Wales and Tokai. Second round, we got Iron Hands, and we was just like, yeah, good game. Turn 2 is basically over.
They're not unbeatable again. They're not unbeatable though, mate. I beat at the Plymouth War tournament. I beat a triple. This is again before any Iron Hands nerfs. It was triple Repulsor Executioner, Leviathan Dread, 2 Chaplain Dreads, and some intercessors for troop choices. So it's like a really brutal, like heavy firepower list. And my Reavers like won me the game basically because turn 1 they jumped up. I charged the Chaplain Dread, but then wrapped and trapped the Leviathan Dread and the other Chaplain Dread, and kept them in combat for 2 turns whilst my Talos moved up and then touched everything else in bad ways. So,
and, like this was when Craft World Elder still had the minus like 2 and 3 airplanes, and we had an Iron Hand still hitting us on 2s.
Yeah,
it was just fucking disgusting. Honestly.
I'm actually glad that Iron Hands aren't the talk of the town anymore. To be honest, it's well, I wouldn't even go as far as saying Salamanders because they haven't really been played as much. The things that I've seen, it's more Death Watch and Blood Angels are the sort of things that I've seen quite a lot.
I think Ultras and Scars are the best myself, but.
Yeah, John Lennon, he's rocking the Scars at the minute, and there are some really dirty little lists that he's brought out of the bag. Ultramarines, I haven't really seen a great deal of them.
See, I don't know why. I think Ultramarines are right up there. Like they got some of the best HQ choices in the game. Like Calgar's an absolute monster. Like, and their doctrines and their stratagems make them so versatile. They can the Ultramarines are literally you could throw a dart at that codex and they can make that unit good. The fall back and still shoot is it's
really good.
Second to none, really.
Yeah. And they got the redeploy strat, which is amazing. They got Gulliman, who's still a monster. Like,
yeah, I think Ultramarines are still very strong. We play them a lot on the channel, and you can literally just pick up any units and have a good army.
Yeah, I think people have written off Ultramarines because aggressors got nerfed. They suddenly think Ultramarines aren't that good, but like I don't really see it myself. I still see that Ultramarines make your troop choices really versatile. There's no way to really lock the troops down because they can just fall back. You can redeploy your units. You've got some really decent HQs. You can make. I think Ultramarines are really good. Yeah.
I think the redeploy strat is a lot more.
I think that what Paddy said at the beginning is like, who? What?
Sorry, I think we all broke up there a little bit. I think the redeploy strat is a lot more prevalent now with the changes to first turn.
Yeah.
First if you get first turn.
Exactly. So like everybody will be deploying to go second, and then Ultramarines get that first turn. Okay, I just redeploy 3 units. Then you're not really worried then about how you deployed.
Yeah,
so,
redeployment.
Yeah, with Harlequins as well.
Yeah. Me and you had a little game of chicken, mouse and chicken, didn't you, or whatever? We both fucking went to redeploy against
mouse and chicken? What kind of predatory chickens do you live by?
I got KFC on my mind, right?
Chicken and mouse.
You mean cat and mouse, Mike?
Yeah. And we both
stick with chicken and mouse.
We both deployed, and we was both like, we're going to do shenanigans here.
Well, what was it that you thought that the title of this Wasson was going to be?
Lobs in the back line.
I think
Now
I
it's
think you
chicken
should
and
mouse
the
the chicken.
But yeah, I think the main thing with list building is don't just build one list and like that's it. Like you need to adapt it. You need to play test it. Like you can get ideas by looking at if you're aiming for competitive like level, then you can get ideas from looking at tournament results and things like that. But instead of looking at like the whole army composition, look at like what units they're using, and then
Hello.
think like right, they've used these, and then start putting those units in your army. But like, and then just play test is the most important thing. Right, just keep using it.
Yeah, the sort of changes that you want to be making, that if you are going to be making any, things like taking a different relic or a warlord trait or something like that, those are the very small changes that you want to be making.
Yeah.
Then once you've got enough games under your belt, then that's when you can start thinking about taking out a unit and bringing something else. But essentially stick to the core of what you've got, and then switch round like the certain like little aspects to the list.
Yeah.
I wouldn't just go off and go, oh well, my outriders aren't doing anything for the past 2 games. I'll just drop them.
Have you tried them in the Death Watch list, mate?
Bye, George. I got a load of Death Watch shoulder pads, so don't joke. Right? Don't joke, George, because I will. I will stick Death Watch shoulder pads on all my white scars. And then you'll be cursing the day that you took the piss out of me. We're only allowed to have fucking 9 bikes. Yeah. Just because you're allowed bikes at 10 points each.
Definitely not a typo.
100% not.
100% not a typo. Totally legit. 10-point Reavers. Makes sense.
Right, shall we wrap it up there?
Yeah.
So, thanks to all you guys for coming on again.
Coming on.
And hope everyone takes a bit of advice or something from this. Apart from us just rambling on.
You do like a good ramble.
Yeah. Right. Until next time. Cheers and gone.
Cheers.
Cheers.
That's it for this week, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. Let us know in the comments anything you want to add. And if you're not already, make sure you subscribe, like. Yeah. Till next time. Cheers and gone.